Jim Martindale from Wabash. Welcome to all of my good friends that are here. You can hold the applause, okay? Appreciate the opportunity to speak, Clint. Thank you for the invitation. I was at your meeting last year, Ken, where you spoke, and I thought for sure you were going to start talking about curse busters with the program you presented about air and water, and you did it again today. So I feel like it's almost parenthetical for me to even talk about gas exchange and the things, but we'll do it anyway. I'm going to try to skate through this as effortlessly, as painlessly as I can. Okay, we'll start right there. The first part of my talk, I want to go to fly through some things that we are seeing, as the title said. I want to show you some of the things that are happening on farms around different parts of the country. And then I want to kind of delve into why are these things happening. And that's where we'll get to some of the science and the impact that the physical component of dealing with soils begins to impact biologically and begins to impact not just structurally, but also chemistry. We're going to look at some of that as well. So anyways, this is a picture of Mark Wagner, the milk of 1,800 cows outside of Madison, Wisconsin. I show you that picture. Too bad I didn't have a closer up. You could appreciate the number of roots that broke off at 52 inches. This is first year corn, went 30.5 tons of silage to the acre at 35% dry matter. No insecticides, no fungicides, none of the crutches. And when we dig corn roots, I would recommend you do the same way. Start between the rows. You know you're going to find roots in the row. The question is, do you find roots between the rows? And how many and how deep? And that's, as you can see, the trench that we dug, that's what we did. We'll look at some more of those trenches in a little bit. Interesting part about this field was that he had applied 2 full liters of glyphosate, one in August of the preceding year and another one right in front of the planter in the spring. And he was experiencing, on some of these fields, some gibberella for the first time in the stalk. Wasn't exactly crown root, but it was gibberella inside the stalk at about 3 inches. And we were really struggling because we'd never seen this in our 3-year experience. So I pulled some glyphosate samples and sent them off to Portland, Oregon, to the folks out there that are the government's first choice on checking all kinds of chemical residues. And Pacific Ag Labs came back with nothing detectable at 17 parts per billion. Technically, what was in that soil applied total in exudate and surface applications probably should have been around 2,000 parts per billion, and it was not able to be found. 3 years of basically running, 2 years of it in hay with the curse buster, creating good gas exchange, good root regeneration underneath that hayfield that was then terminated, multi-species cover, and then we did our test. This, by comparison, was a plot we did in Ohio in conjunction with Mark Dodd, and they only put on 1 liter in the spring, and we had 39, 35 parts per billion and 19 parts per billion showing up on the test. You couldn't get the shovel in these plots more than 4 inches. Salford RTS for about a half a dozen years, and root masses were all done at 4 inches. This is really important in terms of glyphosate. This is a little bit of a sidebar. I feel I have to mention it because how many people here still use glyphosate? Come on, fess up. Okay. One of the things that happens, which is so critical, is the fact that glyphosate likes the chelate iron. That's its favorite mineral. You think it's manganese because that's what shows up on a bean plant, but the bean plant is actually missing iron. But most importantly, iron is used in the production of superoxide. And if you've listened to Dr. White at all from Rutgers, you know about superoxide. Anybody hear him? Oh, a couple of hands. Well, please go listen to Dr. White. He will talk to you a lot about the microbiological world. Anyway, without the production of superoxide, the whole process of rhizophagy, which is the consumption of the contents of microbes as plant nutrition, will not happen. Dr. White's contention is that 70% of the nutrition your plant receives is potentially from consuming a microbe and farming out its contents according to its own unique needs. It's actually signaling the soil microbial community to supply exactly what the plant is looking for. And as someone mentioned before, it's not nitrate nitrogen. It's amino acids, which uniquely microbes can supply. It's a living organism made with amino acids. If you tie up iron, none of that process happens. Are you with me? Are we tracking? That's free, just a bonus. This is a picture out of Arthur, Ontario, taken just about a week ago. He got some snow cover. There's about a foot of snow at the time he took the picture. One of the things that he was really intrigued by is the presence of the earthworm feeding and where they were in the top inch of the field. This is going to be really important in a few minutes. This is the kind of population that Carl has produced at the end of 3 years. He's had this over 20-year habit of going out in the spring of the year when it's a first decent day, late April, early May, and he takes his wife's little 6-inch spade that she used for transplants in her garden, and he'll spade up one spadeful of soil. Historically, he found 8 to 10 worms. After 3 years of his normal crop rotation, all of his hog manure is surface supplied, nothing injected. The soil has not been turned or mixed in any way in 3 years. He found 89 worms. And it continues, and it's increasing every year. We're going to look at some other data from Carl here, too. This is another thing that we found. Greg, you can vouch for this because you were there and you saw the infrared thermometer go up. This was a pit that we dug at Greg Kratzer's place last week of May. In 24, we went down 21 inches to see where the roots were between the corn rows, and I inadvertently grabbed my son's infrared thermometer as I left the house, and I shot it down in the bottom of that 21-inch trench, and that's what it said. Last week of May. Hello. I am still struggling. We're going to try to figure out here in a little while, how could you achieve in a soil that should have been at 54, 56 degrees, 82 degrees of temperature at 21 inches of soil. 5 years with the Curse Buster. I don't really have time. I'm really in a crunch. But you'll find this data in various PowerPoints on my website. I encourage you to go there. One of the things that we see happening very consistently is you look at the nitrate-nitrogen column. Instead of nitrates moving down through the soil profile as water-soluble nitrogen, nitrates are accumulating in the top 7 inches of this 21-inch profile system. That's how I check soil nitrogen to help determine side dress rates or any supplemental N. Is I do a 21-inch core and I put it in 3 different bags, 0 to 7, 7 to 14, and you can see them listed there on the left-hand side. And as you'll see, almost exclusively, you'll find larger amounts of nitrate nitrogen in the top 7. The other thing which is really interesting, which is not so evident with this test, but it is evident in a video which I did with Greg and Mark Dodd in his shop, we're seeing the ammonium, or the non-leachable form of nitrogen, actually accumulate or increase in the bottom 7 inches of this 21-inch profile. And it doesn't leach, right? NH4 attaches to the colloid and it will not move. It's really strongly adheres. That's why anhydrous goes out, NH4, and it doesn't leach. You don't worry about it leaving your soil profile. It might denitrify in the spring, but it's not going to leach. And that's why a lot of guys still do anhydrous in the fall. It's safe. So that's a really interesting commentary when you think about, if it doesn't leach, how does it get there? Well, there's only about one way left, right? Root systems have to leak it. Exudates, we've heard that word a lot today, haven't we? And it's a very important subject. In this case, it's actually exudates from roots that are running that deep losing that much of their amino acids to produce that amine. And here's an example of it. This is that data you can see in the video. In 3 years, surface applying manures on the spar acreage, we went from about 30% nitrate nitrogen to 46. However you cut it, that's about a 50% increase in the amount of nitrate nitrogen that's in the top 7. The middle 7 is down to 24 from the low 30s, and the one in the very bottom is still hanging in the low 30s. Those will eventually drop in a period of 5 to 10 years, and you'll probably see something in the low teens or even single digits in the bottom 7, then in the teens in the middle 7, and you'll be up around 60 to 65% of the total nitrate N in that soil is in the top 7 inches. Ammonium nitrogen, you see it there, it's up to 37% in the bottom 7 inches. And when we dig root systems on these farms that do this, we'd have no problem finding root systems that have exceeded 3 and 4 feet in depth. No problem at all. So you're getting the idea that having something done with tillage has a profound effect on how microbes and soils manage nitrogen. You think it's just tillage. You think it's maybe just the seed bed, but it's a whole lot more profound than that. And it's because of what you guys have been talking about all morning, air and water management in that soil. This is a very complex slide that I really don't have time to go into, but it just indicates the same thing. This was on the Merrick farm in Wabash, where basically running the same form of tillage under a different name for 13 years resulted in this. And one of the things that it pointed out to me very quickly was that in going to strip tillage, got some strip tillers in here? Oh, I'm surprised. Usually there's some guys that have gone to strip till. But what you're creating with strip tillage is essentially a toilet. And we'll look at that here and why I'm saying that in just a minute. What you have done is you've loosened soil in a strip, approximately 8 to 10 inches wide, making essentially a place which is preferred for water to go. Water between the strips tends to run into the strip. You with me? Are we tracking? So what you've done is basically added water to the back of your toilet, so when you push the handle, the turds fly. Well, in this case, the nitrogen flew. It flushed so much water through it that the unused nitrate nitrogen that was resident in that soil, equal to half of the amount of nitrogen in the manure they applied in the strip, was gone below 21 inches. Couldn't find it. Getting the idea? Water management is absolutely critical to nitrogen behavior. All right, here's Mark Wagner again. He was disappointed after 6 years. This field had been in alfalfa for 6 years. We're looking at January in 1924, or 2024, when it never got cold enough to put a dormancy gene in action on alfalfa. So he's out here in January running his alfalfa. And a dormancy occurred, but it was the next month in February when it finally got cold. And if you visit my website and study the alfalfa fact sheet, you'll understand why this sequence of events is so critical for what you're going to see happen. Whoops. Yes, quite, Greg. Oh.
I want to say one thing.
Yes, sir.
Not only are my soil temperatures that deep, that warm, when the surface temperature gets hot, when it's hot out, my soil temperature is cooler. That's the only thing I want to say.
Okay. Well,
I've got to be informed.
all right. Thank you for the comment.
Yep.
We'll get into that, Greg. So this was the picture I received from my friend Mark out there in Middleton. And I asked him, what field is that? And he said, well, that's that one I tried to kill back there in January. Oh, I see. I said, is that the one with all the shepherd's purse that put the first cutting in the heifer bunker? He said, that's the same field. There's no shepherd's purse left. First time in now the third year we don't have any left. It's gone. The grasses were covered up. You can see a little bunch there in the middle. That's what the third cutting looked like, and the field went literally from last place for the last several years to third place in just 6 months. and one application of the tool. Strictly a physical manipulation of soil. And the reason it's so breathtaking is what we need to get into. Definitely controlling erosion. In this case, Mark shot this for me. It was in wheat. They applied 17,000 gallons of manure in 2 applications in the same day. Took 2 inches of rainfall in 3 hours the next morning, and he said the straw never even moved. The infiltration and the percolation was so good that that amount of water never sat on the surface. It failed to move anywhere on the surface of the field. So basically, I want to show you these 2 soil tests from Carl Brubaker, who has all these earthworms that you saw. These are basically 2 different core depths. If you've worked with me much at all, you know I am totally convinced the only real meaningful core is a 0 to 3 core. In Carl's case, he did a 0 to 3 core and he did a 0 to 6. And I want you to look at the absence of stratification. The reason I do 0 to 3 inch cores is because generally I find a lot of stratification. Sometimes as much as 3 to 1 in terms of potash concentrations in the top 3 versus the bottom 3 or 4. In this case, we're not looking at the bottom, we're looking at the whole 6-inch core. And you can see, I think calciums are virtually equal. 11 pounds difference. If you look at potassium, 298 versus 266, there's basically only 2% more potash in that top 3 inches than there is on the average for the whole core. Phosphorus, basically same thing. Sulfur, dead on equal. These are not normal, guys. If you ever are tempted to do this and you want to see about your nutrient stratification, you can do it like Carl did it, or you can do it in a 0 to 2, 0 to 3 core, and then separate that core and submit the bottom half of the plow layer for analysis. This is what we're seeing happen after 8 years, no soil mixing at all. Nothing injected, everything surface applied, including his swine manure. To me, that was, I've seen it before in Saskatchewan with limited rainfall, but we see the exact same thing happen. This is another real breathtaker for organic guys. I really have a burden for them because how many guys here farm organically? Got a couple guys here, yep. So basically, it's very difficult to farm organically and maintain weed control without destroying your soil. A lot of soil manipulation required in order to maintain weed control. In fact, some of the organic farms I work on have worse soil density and worse soil tilth than any other farms I work on, simply because the soil is being tilled over and over and over and cultivated and over it goes. All extinguishing basically all the fungal populations. So this is a piece of oats that went into a field in Aerosmith, Illinois. Had not had any tillage done on it in the fall or spring. It was ridged 5 inches with 2 passes of a Henniker cultivator, and it was totally covered with henbit and mouse-eared chickweed. The first pass over, we leveled the field. Second pass was the drill. The third pass was back with the curse buster again, right over the drill, getting rid of the rest of the weeds that were down in the valley between the rows. And there's the rows of oats. The oats went 115 bushel, and the buyer came back to the shop. And she wanted to know how they uniquely were able to grow 250 acres of organic oats that didn't have a weed in them. Totally weed-free. So those are some of the things that we're seeing happen. And that's not all of them. They're all kind of breathtaking. And a little bit hard to explain except for these 2 elements, which are the basis and the fundamentals of the entire ecosystem of the planet, air and water. Anything that lives, it's got to breathe. We want a living soil. We definitely have to make provision for what has been called here earlier today. I heard somebody use the term gas exchange. We have to be able to move oxygen in, CO2 out. and resupply on a regular, quote-unquote, daily basis. For a long time, I only thought this happened when it rained. And some of you may have been party to that conversation. I've changed my mind. It's every day, and I'll show you why. I'm not going to read all of that except to go over in the water column and to point out something I think which we really need to come to terms with. We know we have free water. It runs through the soil. It adds to the water table. The other form of water that's really important is capillary water. Hello? Anybody heard of capillary water? Raise your hand. You know what I'm talking about. All right. We typically run rollers on the top of our field to encourage it to come back to the to spring into action, right? You got to dry soil, you got to firm it, you got to reduce the pore space in order to get the water to climb against gravity. That's what makes capillary water. It requires two specific features and characteristics of water. One is it adheres to a surface, and number two, it adheres to itself. It has cohesion and it has adhesion. That's why you see it sitting on the side of your truck door after you washed it. It's adhering. It's forming a droplet, so it's cohesive. Those two features are the only form of water that created all the hydrocarbon-based fuels that you're burning today. The Bible records very clearly it never rained until Noah's day. So all that vegetation that decomposed to produce the crude, the coal, and all the stuff that we burn today was grown without a drop of rainfall. The only source was capillary water. So, given the primacy of capillary water before the flood, how important do we think it is today? Could it be just as important today as it was then? I kind of agree with you, brother. I think it is. It really makes me think it is. And most of the time, what we do, and in fact what God himself did, frustrates capillary water. Genesis 8:21, he said, I have cursed the ground, and I will never do it again for your sake. What I'm going to expose to you is the anatomy of that curse. And better than that, I'm going to show you how to arrest it. Bad guys need to get dealt with, right? Even though God has to create it to frustrate you, and he says that in Romans chapter 8, verse 19. All of creation has been submitted to frustration. Futility, Paul calls it. Anybody else remember that scripture? Boy, did that take on meaning to me about 6 months ago. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to start to preach. He puts hardship in our lives, right, for a purpose, to drive him to himself. In Isaiah chapter 28, it ends that whole chapter by saying, and God will give you wisdom. After he finishes rebuking Israel for overtilling the promised land and telling him, you're going to Babylon for 450 years because you violated my Sabbath rest. You know why? You think recreational tillage is a new deal? You needed diesel engines and big tillage tools to be excessive tillage? No. Israel knew how to do it. They had a lot of boys, a lot of oxen. They got her done. They drove their production so low they couldn't rest the land for a year. How many of you can rest 7 to 3? Anybody here ready to start setting one afield? 7th of the farm every year? Something about our rates of production, right? Profitability. So basically, you also have hygroscopic water, which sits on a colloid, doesn't go anywhere. It basically nourishes the microbial community. And if you don't have capillary water, you won't have hygroscopic water. So everything begins to fall apart around water. If you read the Bible, you'll see how absolutely essential the behavior of water is and how God has used water as a mover and shaker in our entire ecosystem. Okay. Now we're going to skip that. I got this picture from Mike Palmquist. I'm already over time, right? I'm keeping you from lunch, guys, if you ever had a question about that. I got this picture from Mike Palmquist. He's a first-year user of the Curse Buster in South Dakota. And his fields were surrounded the same day with guys running field cultivators and soil finishers. And he was out there doing primary tillage 9 inches deep. And the next morning at 6 o'clock, it was dead calm in South Dakota. And he drove by his field, and that's what he saw. And he sent me the picture and a video that goes with it. And he said, Jim, it's not over any of their other fields in this entire area. It's just over my field. And only one thing came to mind. I love your smile and your support. I said, well, it sounds like you're farming in the garden, Mike. You remember how it said there was a mist every morning that covered the earth? Every morning. Where'd it come from? Had to come from capillary water, didn't it? Because it didn't rain last night. It wasn't going to rain for a long time yet. That mist was good every morning. It was because, cut right to the chase, capillary water worked really well. It hadn't been interfered with yet. Okay. Anyway, we'll get right through here. We've got to go. Here's the anatomy of the curse. I happen to just think that there was a reason why that water went out of that field. You can read the whole story on my website. In minutes, that had stood dead calm on an alfalfa field for 4 days, would not move. And we put a piece of 6-inch, where'd that come from? We put a piece of 6-inch steel in the ground through the water, driving through the water, and it drained. And when I did a mechanical or a textural analysis of the soil, this is what I found. If you take that chart and flip it sideways, you'll see there's a 0 to 1 inch, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, so on. Every inch of that 7-inch core I put in a different bag. And I sent it to the lab in Bowling Green, Missouri, and I said, give me a mechanical assay. What does that mean? Anybody know? Come on. Anybody take agronomy 1? All right. If you take soil and you put it in water and you shake it up and down and you let it sit on your counter overnight, or better yet, for a few days, you'll see that there's sand in the bottom, silt next, and clay will be settling on the top. Water will serve as a density divider. It'll let the heavier particles settle faster, the lighter particles next, and the lightest particles last. There you have it, sand, silt, and clay. So he did that with every inch that I sent him from each bag. And if you look in the 5th inch, all of a sudden there's a spike in that purple, how that swells up there. That means there was more silt found in that inch. The bottom purple is the sand, the burgundy is the silt, and the beige color is the clay content. That's how we classify soils today, based on the percentages of sand, silt, and clay. And that's how you can say I have a clay loam or a sandy loam or a silty sand or whatever. It's based on these percentages. So something had changed, and it also is fairly apparent in the 2nd inch. You notice there's a marked decrease in the amount of silt in the top inch. It finally came to rest, that silt moving with the water in the 5th inch. And every soil is unique. I have actually worked with sandy soils that have 2 zones of accumulated silt. One in the 2nd inch and one in the 5th. So this, folks, is how the macropores of your soil no longer function to exchange water and air. Think of your kitchen sink and you're peeling potatoes or carrots and you're running water and your peelings keep winding up on the strainer in the bottom of your sink. After a while, if you don't shut the water off, it's going to overflow the sink, right? Because the water can't get out the trap. You with me? Does the metaphor work for you? That's what happens here. When you get about 20 to 25 inches of precipitation or irrigation water, combined snow melt, whatever, you'll have moved enough silt that you're going to overflow the sink. It's that simple. Now, everybody that does tillage, believe it or not, you're addressing this curse. There's a lot of ways to address it. Chisels do it, plows that run deep enough, discs that run deep enough. All kinds of tools will run deep enough to impact this density layer and redistribute the silt so you can start over again.
You're saying the silt actually seals off the ground, not the clay?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite catch that.
You're saying the silt is actually what seals off the ground, not the clay?
No, clay seals the top. The clay disperses under the raindrop impact. Deficiencies of calcium aggravate it, which is why we're talking about gypsum here a bunch today. Unfortunately, what we're talking about is percolation. You can have great, I say this all the time, you can have great infiltration, but it's only as good as your percolation. When the percolation goes to zero, it doesn't take long before the glass fills and your infiltration will go to zero. That's why you see those deep ditches in the spring and no-till. The glass filled, and it all ran down the slope and made your ditch in the bottom. We've been redefining erosion on no-till for 50 years, and we're still trying to figure out what it is. This is it. If you deal with the density layer, so you have percolation and infiltration, now you got something that works. It's all there. That's the question, okay? Was that another hand? Okay. So basically, that's the science. It's called micro-erosion, and this is how it's so important. I couldn't find anything else that did any better job of describing the impact than an image of a compressor. The compressor is essentially an air movement machine. And if basically we have gas exchange, we need an air movement machine. And God knew that when he put the system together. He confounded it and frustrated it when he made it rain by moving silt particles. Essentially, you have air in and air out on a compressor. The capillary water is very important in this whole process, and gravitational pull is what's really involved. Because water is water no matter where you go, and because gravitational pull is the same no matter where you go, doesn't matter if you can see the water move or not. If you lived in Puget Sound, this is what the tide would look like. Move several feet in height, depending on the arrangement of the planets and the moon. Hello, right? You lived in Virginia Beach, you'd get a tide in the forecast every day. We don't ever hear about it here in Huntington because we don't have that much open water to see it. I got a guy in Wisconsin in Menominee actually took an old 30-foot dug well and he floated a piece of styrofoam in it and put a rod on top and he watches it move up and down. He said, I don't hardly believe you, brother. I said, well, that's just fine. Test me. He said, it's moving up and down every day. Every time the moon goes over, it moves up. Every time the moon goes by, it drops. And so what do you think happens to the air on top of your well? Well, he says, I got air coming out of the well and I got air going in the well. There you go, brother. You see it? How do you make that work? You got to deal with silt. It's making sense, ain't it? You guys getting it? Because it's good thing, because I ain't got much more time to persuade you. There's the system. This is kind of what it looks like in an old diagram I drew up 40 years ago. It actually still works. You move enough water, you'll move enough silt, you'll have a density layer of silt. Micro-erosion will be active in your soil. Poke a hole in it, redistribute it, take your choice. I'll take the choice of just making it ineffective. That's all I want to do is make it ineffective. And that's what that tool's been doing for 40 years, making it ineffective. And in so doing, it is so gentle on soil, we actually grow bacterial populations, we grow fungal populations, and they never have to move. They never have to get rearranged. You see what I'm driving at? We are targeting the problem and not creating parallel problems. You know, it's the side benefits that we get from tillage. Yeah, that stops us from growing soil. All right. Yeah, it's the same idea as how you heat your house or your shop, right? You guys got shop stoves. How many guys got a shop stove? Really? You work in a coal shop? I know you don't, Wayne. If you don't have a fan or some way of moving the air around that wood stove in the corner of your shop, all you got is one hot spot in the shop, right? If you build a new house and all of a sudden, man, why can't we seem to heat this house up like we did 5 years ago? Did you change this furnace filter yet? The water pressure in the second floor shower is really getting low, Mom. Well, I'll talk to your dad. What do you think's going on up there? Well, it's probably down cellar. I haven't changed the water filter in 3 years. Getting the idea? That's why 82 degrees. How do you move heat down? Last time I took general science in 9th grade, all heat rises, all cold sinks. Is that still true? Hello? Is that still true? Thank you, Matt. I needed that. So if you're going to move enough something to take soil from 54 to 56 at 21 inches, how'd it get there if heat rises? Anybody ever watch those spring sunshiny days, in April and May, and watch those waves over the field? That's heat rising, guys. It's not going in the ground. It's rising, warming up the air. Well, if we don't move the warm air in the ground, how are we going to warm up the ground? You getting the drift? What if you run warm water in the soil and it actually goes down instead of sitting there? 3 inches of soil in the mud. You actually move heat down. You do it by raising the temperature of air and water and moving them efficiently through your profile. Stand back, because the microbiological world is about to explode because you did one thing. We don't call it the silver bullet, Clint. But my departed good friend Greg says it's about as close to one as you can get. Still need some gyp. We still need to take care of calcium. In fact, you're going to have to pay more attention to calcium than ever before, because the cell wall of every bacteria is about 80% calcium. You expect to reproduce bacteria, you'll need some available calcium. You're not going to produce another microbe without it. I got to shut up. I've been over time. Anyways, I think this tool, and I got one too, I think we're going to find in the future that this is primitive peat. This is like going to the doctor and poking around on you and finding out you got something wrong. And then he's going to recommend something to fix your problem, which is probably going to be just symptomatic. We're going to give you some pain relief, right? Hello? When I think maybe the real diagnostic tool we ought to be looking at is soil temperature. Now we're looking at, well, did we really get a fix or didn't we get a fix? Because now we're affecting the result, which is going to return us really beneficial results. You getting the idea? Temperature. I got a friend in Michigan, did his graduate work at Ohio State, and he's cranked on this whole concept. He says, I got the technology I used in my graduate study to measure temperature every 2 inches, every hour of the day and night, every month and day of the year. And you can read it on your phone, you can build a bar chart out of it, you can graph it, you can do anything you want. He said, we're going to start to track this phenomenon, because by so doing, we're going to really measure or not we've been effective. Okay, questions? Oh, come on. Baby? No? So that's the essence of the call. The problem is invisible, gentlemen. It's absolutely invisible. But if you don't address it, and you don't address it correctly, or at least more correctly, there's no upside. You're going to destroy the ecosystem by dealing with it. If you think no-till works, then I got to tell you, you're living in total denial of the Word of God. He said he cursed the ground. Now you're responsible for the solution, because now you've seen the anatomy of the problem. My mother always said I'd make a great attorney, You're the jury. You have now been charged. You make your decision. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Yes, question.
Where would be some good places to look for doing more research into this? Because you, of course, with limited time could go into as much detail as you would have liked to.
Where would be the best place to go and do more research on this? I got to tell you, it's not very well published. Acres USA actually has a book written by the widow of Sakara, who was a German scientist, and he actually identified this phenomenon in 1939 using a microscope. And in the German, it translates micro-erosion. It was soil movement, erosion, identified using a microscope, okay? So that's the only written work I have ever seen. I have met half a dozen people in the country over the last 40 years who actually understand this phenomenon. And most recently I was introduced, although I have not had a chance to speak to him directly, a soil scientist from Canada, British Columbia, who was actually using archaeological dig tools, and he has been able to excavate soil profiles so precisely that he's actually able to see it with the naked eye, which is very difficult because it literally is only a few thousandths of an inch thick when it's functional. That's all it takes, is a few thousandths of an inch of silt. Other than that, the literature is sparse. You'll probably read more about it on my website than any place else in the world.
What's the URL for your website?
soilcursebuster.com. Open 24/7, 365.